That is exactly what my mother said as she threw my grandfather's favorite chess book into the garbage can. She even poured her champagne on it, laughing like destroying his memory was just a game. But the moment she left the room I fished it out. He thought she was just throwing away old clutter. He was wrong. Inside the hollowed-out pages was the one thing she didn't know existed, the original notarized last will and testament of Nicholas Vance. It proved the deed she was using to sell the house was a fake. Proved I owned everything. The estate. The money. All of it. She didn't just throw away a book. She handed me the weapon that was going to destroy her. Before I tell you what I did with that book and how I used my silence to let them destroy themselves, drop a comment below. Where are you listening from right now? I want to know who is in my corner. To understand why I didn't run out of that kitchen screaming, you have to understand what happened 1 hour earlier. The funeral reception was winding down. The air in the living room smelled of stale lilies and expensive perfume. I had spent the last 3 hours refilling wine glasses and taking coats, invisible in my own home. When the last guest finally walked out, I approached my mother. She was sitting at the head of the mahogany dining table, reviewing a property appraisal with a man I didn't recognize, a developer who looked like he measured the world in square footage. Mom, I said, my voice quiet. I was wondering if I could have Grandpa's chess book. The one on the mantel. He taught me to play with it. Brenda looked up, annoyed that the help was speaking. She glanced at the leather-bound book on the shelf. That dusty thing? Smells like smoke. She grabbed it. For a second I thought she was going to hand it to me. Instead she tossed it onto a hard wooden chair next to her. Then she shifted her weight and sat directly on it. Actually, leave it, she said, smoothing her skirt. I need a boost. This table is too high for negotiation. She sat on my grandfather's memory like it was a cheap cushion. My brother William, leaning against the sideboard, let out a sharp laugh. Good use for it, he said. He tilted his champagne flute and a stream of sticky golden liquid splashed down onto the chair, soaking the spine of the book. Oops. My hand slipped. They didn't even look at me. They just continued talking to the developer about bulldozing the garden to put in a swimming pool. I stood there, my nails digging into my palms, realizing that to them I wasn't family. I was furniture. I waited until they moved to the patio to smoke cigars before I grabbed the book and ran to the kitchen to wipe it down. That was when I found the will inside. And that was when the rage finally clarified into something useful. If I walked out there right now and waved this document in their faces, I knew exactly what would happen. Brenda would snatch it. She would tear it up, burn it, or claim it was a forgery. It would become a civil dispute. It would be my word against hers in probate court for 5 years, and she had the money to bleed me dry in legal fees. Civil court wasn't enough. I didn't just want the house. I wanted justice. I looked at the wet, ruined cover of the book. I realized that my silence was more dangerous than my voice. If I stayed quiet, if I let them believe they owned the house, they would eventually try to turn that ownership into cash. And the moment they signed a contract using a house they didn't legally own, it wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was fraud. It was a federal crime. I put the book into my tote bag under my spare sweater. I wiped the counter clean. Then I walked back out to the patio, collected their empty champagne glasses and smiled. Greed is the trap. My silence is the bait. 2 weeks later the trap began to close. I was in the sunroom, polishing the windows, invisible as always. Brenda was pacing back and forth, her heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood. The sale of the house had hit a snag. The title search was dragging on because the estate records were old, dating back to the 1940s. The developer was getting cold feet. But Brenda couldn't wait. She had debts I wasn't supposed to know about, gambling losses from Atlantic City, and a lifestyle that required $10,000 a month just to maintain the illusion of wealth. I need the cash now, William, she hissed, throwing a letter on the desk. The creditors are calling. William, lounging on the sofa with his feet up, scrolled through his phone. So get a bridge loan. A hard money loan. I know a guy. He doesn't ask too many questions about title history as long as you have the deed and a notary. High interest, but who cares? We pay it off when the house sells. I scrubbed a smudge on the glass, my heart rate spiking. A hard money loan. It was fast, predatory, and aggressive. It was exactly the kind of mistake a desperate, greedy person would make. How much? Brenda asked. $500,000. Cash wire. Immediate disbursement upon signing. Brenda stopped pacing. I could see the greed wash over her face, smoothing out the worry lines. Do it. Set it up for Friday. They were going to use the house, my house, as collateral for a $500,000 loan. They were going to sign legal documents claiming they were the sole owners. They assumed I was too stupid to understand what collateral meant. They assumed I was just Hannah, the girl who cleaned the windows. I finished the pane of glass, picked up my bucket and walked out of the room. I went to the laundry room, closed the door and dialed a number I had memorized 2 weeks ago. Mr. Vance, I whispered when the lawyer answered. It's happening. They're taking out a mortgage on the property. They're signing on Friday. Are you sure, Hannah? His voice was gravelly and serious. Once they sign those papers, there is no going back. That is bank fraud. They will go to prison. I know, I said, looking at the reflection of my own cold eyes in the washing machine door. Let them sign. Friday morning arrived with the heavy, suffocating silence of a courtroom right before the verdict is read. I had spent the last 2 days scrubbing floors that didn't need cleaning, making myself look busy, making myself look small. I needed them to see me as part of the furniture. If they saw me as a person, they might remember I existed. They might remember I was a threat. But to Brenda and William, I was just the daughter who didn't make the cut, the girl who cleaned up the mess while the adults did business. At 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. It wasn't the police. Not yet. It was Mr. Henderson, the loan officer. He was a small man in a suit that looked expensive but fit poorly, the kind of guy who made his living off desperation and greed. He was followed by a notary, a woman with a stern face and a heavy briefcase. They set up in the library, spreading papers across my grandfather's mahogany desk, the same desk where he used to teach me chess strategies on rainy afternoons. Now it was being used to sell off his legacy. I entered with a silver tray of coffee and biscuits. I kept my eyes down, placing the tray on the side table. Brenda didn't even acknowledge me. She was too focused on Mr. Henderson's laptop screen, her eyes hungry. So, Brenda said, her voice tight. Once I sign, the funds are released? Mr. Henderson tapped a few keys. That is correct, Mrs. Vance. As soon as the notary stamps the deed of trust and the promissory note, I authorize the wire. It is an immediate disbursement. You will see the $500,000 in your account within minutes. But I have to remind you, the interest rate is aggressive. If you miss a payment. We won't miss a payment, William interrupted, leaning over Brenda's shoulder. He smelled of expensive cologne and arrogance. The property is being sold to a developer next month. This is just a bridge. We have equity. He was lying, of course. The developer had already backed out because of the title issues. They weren't borrowing money to bridge a gap. They were borrowing money to run away. They were cashing out a chip they didn't own before the casino realized it was fake. Standard procedure, Henderson said, sliding a thick stack of documents toward Brenda. Sign here. And here. Initial the bottom of page 4. I poured the coffee slowly, making the task last. I needed to see it. I needed to witness the exact moment the crime moved from intent to action. Brenda picked up the pen. Her hand didn't shake. That was the terrifying part. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look at the portrait of her father-in-law hanging on the wall. She just pressed the tip of the pen to the paper and signed her name. Brenda Vance, owner. She signed the loan application. She signed the deed of trust. She signed the affidavit of ownership. With every scratch of the ink, she was digging a hole she could never climb out of. This wasn't just lying to family anymore. This was lying to a federally insured institution. This was wire fraud. This was bank fraud. The notary took the papers, checked the identification Brenda had placed on the table, and then, with a heavy thud, stamped the documents. The sound echoed in the room like a gunshot. It was done. The lie was now a legal document. Congratulations, Mr. Henderson said, typing the final command into his laptop. Initiating the wire now. I picked up the empty cream pitcher and walked out of the room. My heart was pounding a rhythm against my ribs, but my face was stone. I went into the hallway, reached into my apron pocket and touched the screen of my phone. It was time. A single, cheerful chime broke the silence. It came from Mr. Henderson's laptop. He spun the screen around, a greasy smile plastered on his face. Transfer complete. $500,000, successfully wired to the account of Brenda Vance. My mother let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She grabbed William's arm, her eyes wild with triumph. We did it. We're rich. William was already pulling out his phone, probably to call a bookie or a car dealership. I told you, he said, puffing out his chest. Easy money. I stood in the doorway, my hand deep in my apron pocket, my thumb hovering over the mute button on my screen. I was on an active call with Mr. Vance. He was sitting in a sedan at the end of the driveway, and he wasn't alone. I needed one last nail in the coffin. I needed a verbal confession to match the signature. Mom, I said, my voice trembling just enough to sound pathetic. So, the money is in your account? You officially mortgaged the house? Brenda spun around, her face twisting into a sneer. She looked at me like I was a stain on her new carpet. Hannah. The money is mine. The house is mine. Now get out of my sight before I have security throw you out. Security? I asked, my voice suddenly losing its tremble. I don't think you'll need them. I unmuted the line. Did you get that, Mr. Vance? Loud and clear, Hannah, his voice crackled through the speaker. Move away from the door. I stepped aside. The front door didn't open. It burst inward. It wasn't a polite knock. It was a raid. 4 agents in FBI windbreakers moved into the library with the precision of a sledgehammer, followed closely by the district attorney and Mr. Vance. Federal agents. The lead officer shouted. Step away from the desk. The room dissolved into chaos. Brenda screamed, dropping her coffee cup. It shattered, splashing dark liquid over her expensive shoes. William tried to scramble backward, knocking over his chair. What is this? Brenda shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at the agents. Who are you? Get out of my house. It's not your house, Brenda, I said, walking into the center of the room. I reached into my bag and pulled out the chess book. I opened the hollowed-out cover and removed the document I had been protecting for 2 weeks. This is Grandpa's original will. Notarized, registered, and quite clear. I handed it to the lead agent. My grandfather left everything to me. My mother just used a property she doesn't own to secure a federal loan. That is wire fraud. That is bank fraud. The realization hit the room like a physical wave. But the best reaction wasn't Brenda's. It was Mr. Henderson's. The loan officer looked from the badges to the will, and the color drained from his face. He realized he had just facilitated a felony. She told me the title was clean. Henderson yelled, grabbing his laptop and thrusting it toward the agents like a shield. I have the emails. She swore she had the deed. I am not going down for this. You can explain it to the judge, the agent said, taking the laptop. An agent stepped toward Brenda. She jerked back, stunned. No, don't touch me. I'm Brenda Vance. This is my house. Brenda Vance, the agent said evenly, turning her and locking cuffs around her wrists. You are under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, and aggravated identity theft. That click was better than the money. Better than the house. It was the sound of consequences finally arriving. My mother stared at me like she'd never seen me before, mouth parted, eyes wide, then spat, "You little witch." The truth is patient, Mom, I said, cold and steady. And it just ran out of time. As they walked her toward the door, I exhaled for the first time in months. It was over. The house was saved. The monster was in chains. I forgot one thing. Monsters travel in packs. Officer, wait. William's voice was smooth, almost bored. He stood, brushed lint from his blazer, and opened his briefcase like he'd been waiting for his cue. You're arresting the wrong person. Back off, sir, the lead agent warned. I'm afraid I can't. William produced a document stamped with a heavy official seal and handed it over with a smirk. My sister, Hannah, lacks legal capacity to accuse anyone of anything. As of 9 o'clock this morning, she is a ward of the state. The agent scanned the page, frowning. What is this? An ex parte emergency guardianship order, William announced to the room. Severe paranoid delusions. Memory fabrication. A history of planting evidence. He turned to me, pity pasted on his face. It's okay, Hannah. You're having an episode. We're going to get you help. The room went arctic. The agent looked from the order to me, then to Brenda's cuffs, and hesitated. A judge's signature carried weight. If I was incompetent, my testimony was void. The will was suspect. The arrest could be premature. Sir, the agent told Mr. Vance, this order is signed by Judge Miller. It grants immediate temporary custody of Hannah Vance and her estate to William Vance. We have to pause this. Brenda stopped struggling and straightened, a cruel smile returning. I told you, she hissed at me. You're sick. You've always been sick. For 10 terrifying seconds, only the grandfather clock moved. I felt the walls closing in. This was their masterstroke. Lock me away, medicate me into silence, sell the house while I couldn't fight back. I looked at Mr. Vance. He didn't look worried. He looked bored. Officer, Mr. Vance said, stepping between William and the agent. Before you enforce that order, read the addendum to Nicholas Vance's will. Clause 14, subsection B. We call it the competency clause. William scoffed. A will doesn't override a court order, old man. It does when the order was obtained through perjury, Vance snapped, pulling out a second document. Nicholas anticipated this. Any beneficiary who challenges another beneficiary's mental state must submit to a sworn polygraph. And the accuser must prove incapacity with a current, legitimate evaluation. We have an evaluation. William barked, waving a paper. Dr. Schwartz signed an affidavit this morning. Dr. Schwartz. Vance lifted an eyebrow. The same Dr. Schwartz who lost his license in Florida for insurance fraud? Interesting choice. Because we have an evaluation too. He handed the agent a file. Hannah voluntarily completed a full forensic psychiatric evaluation yesterday afternoon, conducted by Dr. Evans, the state's chief psychiatrist. Sound mind. Superior intelligence. fully capable of managing her estate. The agent compared the documents. A shaky affidavit from a discredited doctor used to rush an ex parte order, versus a clean, official evaluation dated 24 hours ago. Grandpa was always 3 moves ahead, I said, voice cutting through the tension. He didn't just leave me money. He left me a shield. The agent's hesitation vanished. He looked at William. Sir, did you use a fraudulent medical affidavit to obtain a court order? That's perjury. That's obstruction of justice. William's smirk collapsed. He stared at the paper like it had turned poisonous. I didn't know. The doctor said. Turn around, the agent ordered. Hands behind your back. No. William stumbled back into the desk. You can't do this. I'm the guardian. I'm the cuffs snapped shut and ended the speech. You're not a guardian, William, I said as they led him out, right beside our mother. You're just another pawn. 6 months later, the mildew and stale champagne were gone, replaced by fresh paint, sea salt, and something sharper: justice. The hard money loan died the moment the federal indictment landed. Banks don't enforce contracts tied to felonies, especially when the collateral was stolen. The title is clean now. The house is mine, legally, morally, completely. I didn't sell Seacliff. That would have been easy. Profitable. But Grandpa didn't leave me this place to cash out. He left it to make a point. I'm renovating the East Wing. By next spring, it won't just be an estate. It'll be the Nicholas Vance Sanctuary, a transitional home for women escaping financial abuse. I'm taking the prison my mother built and turning it into a fortress for people like me. On the balcony, wind in my hair, I sip Earl Grey from Brenda's prized bone china cup. The one she kept locked away, the one she screamed about when I was 12. Case better now. Inside, the library is restored. The stain is gone. Grandpa's chessboard sits set mid-game, except I made one change. 2 black pawns are missing. My phone buzzes, a collect call attempt from county jail. Brenda calls weekly. Sometimes William tries too. They want commissary money. They want to explain. They want to blame me. I don't argue. I don't rage. I open my contacts, tap mother, and hit block. Then I do the same for brother. I didn't just inherit a house, Grandpa. I inherited my dignity. I inherited the right to say no. They thought I was weak because I was quiet. They thought I was stupid because I poured coffee while they plotted. They forgot what you taught me. In chess, the quiet pieces are often the ones setting the trap. You don't have to flip the board to win. You just have to let your opponent make the wrong move. I take one more sip, look out at the gray horizon, then back at the board. Checkmate, Grandpa. If you've ever had to outsmart a bully who lived under your roof, share this story. Let them know, we're watching and we're patient.